2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I received a message from my mother that made my stomach drop. "It's better if you don't come this year." That was it. No explanation. No discussion. Just a cold sentence that suddenly made me feel like a stranger in my own family. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. My family had always celebrated Thanksgiving together. No matter how busy life got, we always gathered at my parents' house for dinner, laughter, and the same old arguments that somehow felt comforting. So I called my mom. She didn't answer. I tried again later. Still nothing. Finally, a few hours later, my father texted me. "Your sister told us everything. We think it's best if you stay away this year." I stared at the screen in confusion. Everything? What exactly had Melissa told them? My sister and I had never been particularly close, but things had never been bad enough for something like this. At least, that's what I thought. I typed back slowly. "What are you talking about?" The response came quickly this time. "Melissa says you've been lying to everyone about helping the family. She said you've been pretending to support us financially to make yourself look good." For a moment, I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lying? Pretending? If only they knew the truth. For years, I had quietly helped my family whenever they needed it. When my dad struggled with unexpected medical bills, I paid them without saying anything. When Melissa and her husband Daniel had trouble keeping their small business afloat, I stepped in and helped them restructure their finances. But I never announced it. I never posted about it. I never demanded gratitude. I simply helped because they were my family. And now, apparently, that had turned me into the villain. I read the message again, feeling a strange calm settle over me. They had already made up their minds. Melissa had convinced them that I was some kind of liar seeking attention. Part of me wanted to defend myself immediately, but another part of me knew something important. The truth had a funny way of revealing itself eventually. So instead of arguing, I simply replied with one short message. "Okay. I won't come." Then I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair. If my family wanted a Thanksgiving without me, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. They just had no idea what would happen next. After that message, everything went quiet. No calls, no texts, no family group chat notifications. It was like I had suddenly disappeared from their lives overnight. At first, the silence felt strange. For years, my phone had constantly buzzed with messages from my family. Usually it wasn't about casual conversations or checking in. It was about problems. There was always some kind of emergency. My dad's car needed repairs. My mom had a medical bill she couldn't cover. Melissa and her husband Daniel were struggling with their business again. And somehow, those problems always ended up on my plate. Not because anyone asked directly, but because I could see what was happening behind the scenes. I worked in financial consulting, and fixing complicated situations was part of my job. Helping my family had always felt natural to me, but I never made a big deal out of it. When my dad's hospital bill arrived 2 years ago, I quietly paid half of it through a financial assistance program I arranged. When Melissa and Daniel's small marketing company nearly collapsed during a rough year, I helped restructure their debt and secured a private investment to keep them afloat. No one outside the paperwork ever knew. Melissa had always taken the credit publicly, telling people that Daniel had figured everything out. I didn't care at the time. I wasn't helping them for praise. But now, sitting alone in my apartment while my own family believed I was a liar, I started to realize how strange the situation really was. Melissa had told them I was pretending to help the family, and they believed her without asking a single question. Not one. I checked my phone again that evening. Still nothing. The group chat titled Family Thanksgiving 2025 was active, but I had been quietly removed from it. That stung more than I expected. For a moment, I considered calling my parents again and explaining everything. I could show them the documents, the agreements, the financial records proving I had been helping for years. But then I stopped myself. If they were willing to cut me off that easily, maybe they needed to learn the truth another way. So instead of trying to defend myself, I opened my laptop and started reviewing a few important contracts. Because most of the help I had given my family wasn't just personal. It was legal. And those agreements were about to reach a very interesting deadline. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For a moment, I forgot everything that had happened. But then I saw my phone sitting on the nightstand, completely silent, and the memory of my parents' message came rushing back. They had chosen Melissa's story over me without hesitation. Instead of feeling angry, I felt strangely calm. If they believed I had been lying about helping them, then maybe it was time for the truth to speak for itself. I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. Inside a folder labeled Family Agreements, there were several documents most of my family had never actually read. Not because I had hidden them, but because they had trusted Melissa and Daniel to handle everything. The first file was connected to my parents' house. 3 years ago, when my dad lost his job for a few months, they had nearly fallen behind on their mortgage payments. Melissa had called me in a panic back then, saying the bank was threatening foreclosure if they missed another payment. I had stepped in quietly and arranged a financial restructuring plan. Part of that plan included temporary financial backing from me. But it wasn't just a gift. It was a formal agreement through my advisory firm. If the financial support stopped, the plan would automatically expire. The second document was even more interesting. Daniel's business loan. 5 years earlier, Melissa and Daniel had started a small marketing company. The first year went well, but the second year nearly destroyed them. They had taken on too much debt and were close to shutting everything down. Daniel had come to me privately, embarrassed and desperate. I had helped him negotiate with lenders and secure a private investment that kept the company alive. That investment also came from me. Again, it wasn't a casual favor. It was structured through a legal contract. And just like the mortgage agreement, that contract had a condition. If my involvement ended, the financial protection around their loan ended too. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Every agreement had the same clause. Support remained active only while our professional relationship remained in good standing. Melissa had just convinced my entire family that I was a liar who manipulated them for attention. Technically speaking, that meant our relationship was no longer in good standing. I checked the calendar. Thanksgiving was only 10 days away, and several of those agreements were scheduled for automatic review that same week. For the first time since my parents' message, a small smile crossed my face. I hadn't planned any revenge, but sometimes the truth handled things on its own. Thanksgiving morning arrived faster than I expected. Normally, this would have been the busiest day of the year for my family. My mother would be in the kitchen before sunrise, preparing the turkey and dozens of side dishes. My dad would pretend to help while mostly watching football in the living room. Melissa and Daniel usually showed up late, bringing store-bought desserts but acting like they had cooked everything themselves. And me? I was usually the one fixing whatever went wrong. But this year was different. This year, I wasn't invited. Instead of driving to my parents' house, I stayed home. My apartment was quiet, and the only sound was the soft hum of my laptop as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. Outside, people were probably gathering with their families, laughing and celebrating together. Meanwhile, my phone sat face down on the table, still silent. For a moment, I wondered if my parents had thought about me at all that morning. Did they feel even a little guilty about cutting me out? Or were they sitting at the dinner table believing Melissa's story, that I had lied about helping them just to make myself look important? I pushed the thought away and opened my email. Several automated notifications had already arrived. They were routine system updates from my advisory firm, but today their timing was interesting. The first notification confirmed that a temporary financial guarantee had officially expired. That guarantee had protected Daniel's business from several loan penalties. The second email confirmed that a mortgage restructuring review period had ended. That agreement had helped my parents avoid falling behind on their house payments. Normally, these agreements would have been renewed automatically. I had done it many times before, without anyone even noticing. But renewal required one simple thing: approval from me. And this year, no one had even bothered to call. I leaned back in my chair and closed the laptop. Across town, my family was probably sitting down for Thanksgiving dinner right about now. They were eating turkey, laughing, and enjoying the holiday, completely unaware that several safety nets they had depended on for years had quietly disappeared that same morning. I didn't feel happy about it, but I also didn't feel guilty. They had made their decision when they chose to believe Melissa without ever asking me for the truth. I checked my phone one more time before standing up. Still nothing. But I had a strong feeling that silence wasn't going to last much longer. The silence didn't last long. Around 3 in the afternoon, just as I was finishing lunch, my phone finally rang. I glanced at the screen. Daniel. That surprised me. Out of everyone in my family, Daniel was usually the calmest. He wasn't dramatic like Melissa or stubborn like my father. Most of the time, he stayed out of family conflicts completely. For a moment, I considered letting the call go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Hello. There was a brief pause on the other end before Daniel spoke. Hey, sorry to bother you today. His voice sounded nervous, which was unusual. It's fine, I said calmly. What's going on? Another short pause followed, like he was trying to choose his words carefully. So, something weird is happening with a business account. I leaned back in my chair. Weird how? Well, he continued slowly, our bank just notified us that the financial protection tied to our loan expired this morning. I already knew exactly what he was talking about, but I kept my voice neutral. And they're saying we could face penalties if the balance isn't stabilized soon. He let out a quiet sigh. The strange thing is, I thought that agreement lasted another year. It did, I replied. Another pause. But the bank says the investor support behind the agreement ended today, Daniel said. I stared out the window, watching the late afternoon sunlight stretch across the street. That's correct, I said simply. Silence filled the line. For several seconds, Daniel didn't say anything at all. Then he asked a question that told me everything I needed to know. Wait, hold on. His voice sounded confused now. You're the investor? I took a slow breath. Yes. The silence that followed was even longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he processed what I had just said. Finally, he spoke again. Melissa told us the investor was one of her business contacts. I couldn't help letting out a small laugh. That's interesting. What do you mean? He asked. I replied calmly. That investor has always been me. Another long pause followed. Somewhere in the background, I could hear faint voices. Probably my family still gathered for Thanksgiving dinner. Then Daniel said something very quietly. I think we need to talk. For the first time that day, I had the feeling that the truth was finally starting to reach the dinner table. About an hour after our first call, my phone rang again. This time, I wasn't surprised to see Daniel's name on the screen. I answered calmly. Hello again. Daniel sounded very different now. The nervous tone from earlier had been replaced with something else, confusion. I just finished checking the business documents, he said. And? I asked. There was a pause. My accountant pulled up the original investment agreement from 5 years ago. I leaned back in my chair, already knowing what he had found. And your name is on everything, Daniel continued slowly. Yes, I replied. Another long silence filled the line. I could practically hear him flipping through papers on the other end. The emergency loan protection, the restructuring plan, even the credit guarantee, he said. They're all tied to your company. That's correct. Daniel let out a quiet breath. For 5 years, I thought Melissa arranged all of this. That didn't surprise me at all. Melissa had always liked being the center of attention. She loved telling people how she and Daniel had built their business from nothing. Whenever someone asked how they survived the difficult second year, Melissa would proudly explain how Daniel worked day and night to save the company. I had heard the story many times. My name was never mentioned. I never corrected her. I said honestly. Daniel sounded even more confused now. Why not? Because I wasn't helping for recognition, I replied. I was helping because you were family. The line went quiet again. Then Daniel asked the question that really mattered. Did Melissa know the investment came from you? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the document on my laptop and looked at the signature page. There it was. Melissa's signature. Right under mine. Yes, I said finally. Daniel went completely silent. This time the pause lasted nearly 10 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was much lower. She knew the entire time. Yes. Another quiet breath came through the phone. And she told everyone you were lying about helping the family? That's what I was told. In the background, I suddenly heard louder voices, like people arguing. Daniel must have turned away from the table, because his voice dropped to a whisper. I'm starting to think there's a lot I didn't know about my own family. I looked at the clock. It was just after 6 in the evening. Thanksgiving dinner was probably ending around now. And it sounded like a very uncomfortable conversation was about to begin at that table. About 30 minutes after my second call with Daniel, my phone rang again. I didn't even need to look at the screen this time. I already knew it was him. When I answered, the first thing I heard wasn't Daniel's voice. It was shouting. Loud voices filled the background, echoing through the phone. Plates clattered, and someone slammed something against a table. Daniel? I said. Yeah, I'm here, he replied, sounding slightly out of breath. What's going on? He let out a small sigh. I asked Melissa a question. I could already guess which one. What did you ask? I asked her why she told everyone you never helped us. For a moment, there was silence on his end. Then another voice broke through the background noise. Melissa, you had no right to call her, she shouted somewhere behind him. Daniel must have moved to another room because the noise became slightly quieter. I didn't call her first, he said calmly. The bank called me. That must have shocked everyone at the table. I imagined the scene clearly in my head. My parents sitting there, confused and uncomfortable. Melissa trying to stay in control of the conversation the way she always did. But this time, the truth had started showing cracks in her story. What did she say? I asked. Daniel hesitated. At first, she tried to laugh it off, he said. She told everyone the bank must have made a mistake. That sounded exactly like Melissa. But then I showed her the documents, he continued. What documents? The investment agreement. The one with your name on it. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. And? I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. The entire table went silent. I could almost picture Melissa's face when Daniel placed those papers down in front of everyone. No one said anything for a full minute, he said. Then my father-in-law asked Melissa if it was true. My dad must have asked that question. What did she say? I asked quietly. Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. She said it didn't matter who helped because it was still their business. Of course she said that. Melissa had never been good at admitting she was wrong. But that wasn't the worst part, Daniel continued. What do you mean? He paused before answering. After that, your dad asked why you weren't at dinner. I felt my chest tighten slightly. And Melissa told them you refused to come because you were angry. I shook my head slowly. That's not what happened. I know, Daniel said. Then his voice turned serious. And I think the rest of your family is starting to realize that too. About an hour after Daniel's call ended, my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made my chest tighten. Mom. For a moment, I simply stared at it. She hadn't answered my calls 2 weeks ago. She hadn't tried to contact me once since telling me not to come to Thanksgiving. And now she was calling. I let the phone ring twice before answering. Hello. Her voice sounded different than usual, quieter, almost nervous. Hi, sweetheart. The word felt strange after everything that had happened. Hi, Mom. I replied calmly. There was a short pause, like she didn't know how to start the conversation. Finally, she asked, Daniel showed us some documents tonight. I didn't say anything. He said you helped with their business loan. She continued carefully. Yes, I answered. Another silence followed. Then she asked a second question. And he said your name is also connected to the mortgage restructuring for our house. I closed my eyes for a moment before replying. That's correct. I could hear my father's voice faintly in the background, asking something. My mom must have covered the phone for a second because the sound became muffled. When she spoke again, her voice sounded more shaken. Why didn't you ever tell us? It was a question I had thought about many times over the years. I didn't think it mattered, I said honestly. What do you mean it didn't matter? She asked softly. I helped because you're my parents, I replied. Not because I wanted recognition. Another long pause followed. Then she asked something that told me the entire dinner table had finally started putting the pieces together. Did Melissa know about all of this? I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. Yes, I said quietly. This time, I heard my father clearly in the background. What did she say? He asked my mother. Mom repeated my answer to him. Then there was silence on the line for several seconds. Finally, my mom spoke again. Her voice was filled with disbelief. Melissa told us you were lying, that you were pretending to help the family to make yourself look important. I let out a slow breath. I know. More muffled voices filled the background. My parents were clearly talking to each other, and probably to Melissa as well. When my mom returned to the phone, her voice had changed. There was something heavy in it now. Regret. I think we may have made a mistake, she said quietly. It was almost 9 o'clock that night when my phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen didn't surprise me at all. Melissa. For a moment, I considered ignoring the call. After everything that had happened, I honestly didn't feel like hearing her voice. But curiosity won again. I answered. Hello. Melissa didn't waste any time. What are you trying to do? She snapped. Her voice was sharp, filled with anger. I stayed calm. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, she continued. You're turning everyone against me. I almost laughed. I haven't called anyone today, I replied. Daniel called me. That's because you set this up, she shouted. I leaned back in my chair. Set what up, Melissa? The bank notices, the documents, all of it, she said angrily. You're trying to embarrass me in front of the family. For a moment, I didn't respond. Then I said something very simple. I didn't do anything today. That's a lie, she shot back. No, I said calmly. What happened today is just the result of agreements that already existed. She went quiet for a second, clearly frustrated. You could have renewed them, she said finally. There it was. The real issue. You're right, I replied. I could have. Then why didn't you? She demanded. I took a slow breath before answering. Because 2 weeks ago you told our parents I was a liar who pretended to help the family. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time during the call, Melissa didn't have an immediate response. Finally, she spoke again. You're destroying this family over something small. Something small. That phrase made me shake my head. You told everyone I made things up to look important, I said. That's not small. You're being dramatic, she replied quickly. Families argue all the time. Yes, I agreed. They do. Another pause filled the line. Then she tried one last angle. You need to fix this, she said firmly. Fix what? The business situation, the mortgage agreements, everything, she said. Mom and Dad are freaking out. I looked out the window at the quiet street outside. For years, I had quietly solved every problem that came my family's way. But tonight felt different. No, I said calmly. What do you mean no? Melissa snapped. I mean I'm not fixing anything. Another long silence followed. Then I said the one thing she clearly wasn't expecting to hear. I didn't create this situation, Melissa. You did. You told the lie, I replied quietly. And now you have to deal with the truth. A week after that chaotic Thanksgiving, Daniel came to see me in person. He wasn't angry, nor was he blaming anyone. In fact, he seemed relieved. I wanted to thank you, he said, shaking my hand. Your help saved my business. Honestly, I didn't know how much until now. I smiled faintly. You're welcome. He looked around my apartment, noticing the quiet, organized space. Then he leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. I can't believe Melissa kept this from everyone for years, and that my own family believed her. I nodded. It had been astonishing to watch. Melissa had spent years convincing the family that she was the one keeping everything afloat. Meanwhile, all the work, all the financial support had come from me. Daniel shook his head. I feel awful for believing her story. I didn't realize how much she manipulated the narrative. It's not your fault, I said. People believe what they want to believe. They never asked me. He paused, as if weighing something carefully. So, are you going back to Thanksgiving next year? I laughed softly. Maybe. But only if the truth is acknowledged first. Daniel grinned. Fair enough. That night, I reflected on everything that had happened. My family had cut me off before Thanksgiving, thinking I was a liar. They had believed Melissa, without question, dismissing years of quiet support. But in the end, the truth had come out in the most ironic way. The safety nets I had put in place for them, the mortgage agreements, the business loans, had exposed the reality. Without my involvement, their plans were vulnerable, and suddenly, my absence became impossible to ignore. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them feel guilty. It was about the truth revealing itself in a way that could no longer be ignored. By the end of the week, my parents had admitted the truth. Melissa had no choice but to stop claiming credit. Even Daniel's small acknowledgement at the dinner table shifted the family's perception entirely. For the first time, they saw me as I always was, dependable, quiet, and willing to help, not for recognition but because I cared. And that, more than anything else, became my real Thanksgiving. I wasn't celebrated with turkey or pie. I wasn't thanked with speeches or applause. Instead, I gained something much more valuable: respect, and the satisfaction of knowing that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always comes to light. This year, Thanksgiving wasn't about the family pretending. It was about everyone finally seeing reality and realizing who had been holding it all together all along. I smiled to myself. Some lessons were better learned the hard way.